Welcome back, Shishacito. I'm here with Nick White from Celestia. How are you doing? How's the shisha?
Good. Shisha is good.
Nice. Thank you, sir.
You're a pro, obviously. It's good to be in Dubai, my first time, and getting the royal welcome from the man himself.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, we had a bit of a shaky start to the conference week here in Dubai with this crazy rain yesterday, but yeah, it's been wild. And unfortunately, we also had to cancel our event, so that was sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is your first time Dubai. How do you like
This
it
is my
so
first
far?
time in Dubai. First 24 hours were a bit of a roller coaster with the floods. We're also probably going to have to, I don't know if we're going to cancel the Modular Dubai event, but we might have to pivot it to a different venue.
Yeah.
So we're kind of figuring that out, which is a bummer. There's a bunch of other events that we're planning to go to, and now it seems everything's been thrown off. But otherwise, the vibes in Dubai are great. I mean, the views,
Yeah.
the people, you know.
It is nice. Yeah, it is a crypto hub. And I think also like what people maybe severely underrate is how much risk like conference organizers take, right? Like you guys also with the Modular Summit, Modular Day, right? It's like events like this are, you can't predict that, right? We're in the middle of the desert and we had just one of the craziest storms I've literally seen in my entire life. I'm German. I lived in Colombia. There's like crazy rains all the time.
Yeah.
But this was another level. It felt like Armageddon almost. It was crazy. So, but yeah, it is what it is. So Celestia, this is, I think, my fourth interview with the Celestia family. I think we did one. Then we also had a debate with Sunny about monolithic versus modular.
That was a good one.
That was interesting, yeah. And then also one with John. So we've literally been tracking kind of the creation of Celestia 2 years before mainnet, I guess, right? Since 2021.
Yeah.
So maybe just kind of a state of your mind right now. Celestia is now on mainnet for 6-7 months, something like that. So yeah, how do you feel about everything? How do you just feel about the current state of kind of Celestia and yeah, everything until now?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank you and the broader Cosmos community because you were one of the first people who took us seriously and helped us tell our story. Because, you know, we were kind of a much lesser known project in 2021, and very much coming from the Cosmos ecosystem, borrowing a lot of the same philosophies of sovereign chains and app chains, and using the underlying technology of Comet BFT, Cosmos SDK, IBC, all these things. And so we're just deeply indebted to you and the Cosmos community generally. And since mainnet launch, I mean, everything's gone very smoothly from our perspective. No downtime, obviously, thanks to the fact that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. We have a very sustainable, or sort of secure and sort of like battle-tested consensus algorithm and everything like that. So we're standing on the shoulders of giants in that way. And then in terms of what's happened on the network since then, we have launched a bunch of rollups, most of them currently Ethereum L2s, who have sort of migrated the DA side of their chains to Celestia. And they have saved an enormous amount of fees because Ethereum call data is very, very expensive. More recently, EIP 444 came out, but there's still a huge need to scale not just Ethereum L2s with sort of modular data availability, but even Bitcoin. There's a lot of like exciting stuff happening in the Bitcoin community, and even maybe in the future Solana potentially.
Nice.
And
Alpha.
Yeah, and anyway, like I think we're just getting started, and we can also talk more about. I think we're on the cusp, but very soon we're going to start to see more of the Celestia native ecosystem emerge. Sort of also related just to the Cosmos side of things. There've been still working and funding a project called RollKit, which will enable Cosmos SDK rollups, as well as Jack Zampolin is working on roll chains, which is sort of like an interesting midpoint between a Cosmos chain and a rollup on Celestia. And that's a kind of an interesting thing that I think we'll be seeing more of. And so yeah, the ecosystem is growing, and you can't rush these things, right? It takes time, and they have to be organic and grassroots. But I think overall, considering it's only been 6 months, things are going pretty well.
Definitely, yeah. I also saw the Celestia memes circulating on Twitter, so that's exciting to see. I think Eclipse is also working on that, right? Bringing the Solana VM, but using Celestia underneath.
Yes.
So that's also exciting. But yeah, so you were saying basically that you're kind of, your roots are in Cosmos, obviously. Celestia itself is also a Cosmos chain, right? And it's also, you said that on the last interview that basically Celestia is a Cosmos app chain for block space, right? And I think it's very refreshing, I guess, for the audience to hear that, like, you know, Celestia is still kind of core Cosmos, because I think Cosmos has a bit of this perception that like people kind of want to distance themselves from it. But it actually, like, behind the scenes, if you talk to developers, I think there's a lot of respect for the technology. I also think that a lot of the things were just way ahead of its time, right? Even IBC.
yeah.
I mean, the whole kind of app chain thesis, also kind of the modular stack, which was pioneered by you guys, but I think it also really fits nicely into the Cosmos vision, right? The Cosmos end game, I guess, in the future. So what are your thoughts on that? And like, maybe you can also break down kind of the modular versus monolithic kind of terms, right? Because I think it still might be confusing for some people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a lot to cover there. So first, on the Celestia being an app chain for DA, I think that's a good framing in the sense of that, like, what app chains are about, and I guess what modularity is about generally is specialization. And so, you know, when you build an app chain, it's like, I'm designing my chain specifically to do this one function and do it really, really well. And Celestia is like that in the sense of, it's designed to just do DA and consensus really, really well. Now, where it's not quite an app chain is that its product is block space. This is raw, unrefined block space that anyone can run their own chain on top of. So it is kind of like, it's kind of as general purpose as you can get, in the sense of, like, you know, you don't think of Ethereum as an app chain because it does general purpose execution. And Celestia's block space is similar in that it's like, you can do lots of different things with it. So in that sense, it's not an app chain because it's like people run app chains on top of it, or any kind of chain on top of it. But overall, I mean, just kind of where modularity came from is, like, a lot of it, I think, is frankly inspired by the insights of the way that Cosmos was designed as a sort of like a software stack, which is that, you know, Cosmos, to my knowledge, was the first sort of software or like stack for building blockchains that decided, hey, actually, let's decouple consensus and data availability from the state machine, from the execution part, right? And then what Celestia does is kind of extends that to not just for, you know, single chains decoupling that, but for like multiple chains, like build a whole protocol, like protocols that fully decouple those functions. And so I think there's just a lot of, like, there's just so much carryover from the Cosmos vision to what Celestia's philosophy is. And, like, truly, you know, again, like, Cosmos is so ahead of its time. Even think about, like, Cosmos didn't just inspire and in a lot of ways, like, you know, help create Celestia. It also, even, like, everyone's talking about restaking nowadays. And that first started, you know, I remember in 2022 at Cosmoverse, last time I was at a Cosmoverse event, the big thing was interchain security back then, right? And now fast forward like almost 2 years, and now, like, the broader crypto ecosystem is waking up to that. And, like, so Cosmos has always just been so far ahead of its time on these ideas.
Even Babylon, right, which is also a Cosmos chain, they even had their kind of coming out of stealth at Cosmoverse. And I think, like you're saying, like, all these big ideas that were, like, in the beginning, there wasn't even like a proper term for it, right? But now, like, modularity is like a giant kind of word that a lot of projects also try to, like, just put into their white papers to, like, increase their market caps. But restaking, same, right? And I think Babylon and obviously Eigenlayer, there's also strong synergies between those projects. We have EtherStake, we have a bunch of others. But yeah, I think it's kind of, it feels like we're like entering a new paradigm of crypto and Web3. And yeah, if you're saying that kind of Celestia's product is block space, how do you see Celestia fit into kind of the competitive landscape? Because it doesn't sound like it does compete with, I don't know, Ethereum or others, but what would we say, like, how does it fit into, like, the general kind of crypto space?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think a lot of people, you know, think of Celestia as competitive with Ethereum, but the reality is Celestia is here to help scale other ecosystems, including Ethereum, with off-chain DA. And so that's and Celestia will never be, for example, a settlement layer. Whereas like Ethereum, a lot of its value prop is like, hey, we have all these users and liquidity on the layer one itself.
Yeah.
And they're not going to get rid of that. So they're always going to have this sort of settlement component, which is going to be a key part of their sort of like overall, I guess, ecosystem.
Yeah.
And then they're adding on the side this data availability component. Whereas like Celestia starting from just data availability, and that's all we want to do. And we are not just specific, but by doing that, by not having settlement in Celestia, it makes the protocol agnostic, sort of like the Switzerland of like DA, in the sense of now we can go to other, like Bitcoin can now be a settlement layer, and Celestia can provide DA for Bitcoin L2s. We can provide DA to Cosmos chains, or maybe in the future even Solana L2s, if that becomes something that community gets into. So I think that's sort of the way to think about it, is like Celestia is, it depends on like which, if there's let's say there's like another pure DA layer, like let's say Avail, that's obviously clearly competitive. But even Avail, I mean, this kind of comes back to the build whatever idea, which is that like it's good to have different offerings in the market.
Yeah.
Even in DA, because there's not a one size fits all, right? And that's what modularity is all about, is like you can choose the component that best achieves what you want to do. And like Celestia makes its own set of trade-offs, other protocols will make their own set. So it's not all zero sum like competition.
Yeah, but I think Celestia so far fits a lot, a lot of projects. I think the Celestia ecosystem is also very exciting. Obviously, I've been covering the likes of Dimension, for example, that launched earlier, right? We also have kind of Initia coming up, even Barachain, Neutron, Saga, like they're also all kind of part of the Celestia ecosystem in a sense. But yeah, can you maybe talk about kind of the state of the Celestia ecosystem? I don't know if you can or want to point out specific projects, maybe some of the things that are coming up. You mentioned Solana earlier, right? The Celestia meme. So yeah, what is kind of your views on the current state of the ecosystem, and maybe some of the things that are cooking right now?
Yeah. So kind of where the state of where things are, touched on this at the beginning, but currently the main like users of Celestia are Ethereum L2s. And that's driven by a need for them to have really scalable DA. And Ethereum, while it's making progress on the DA front with 4844 and things like that, ultimately it will need more DA throughput. And so that's where Celestia is coming in currently. And that's not just limited to Ethereum L2s, but even L3s, where we have this product called Blobstream that is basically a data availability bridge. And it's deployed also on chains like Arbitrum and Base, and potentially in the future other L2s, so that if I want to build an L3 that settles to Base, I can use Celestia for DA. So I think that like it'll continue, the scaling of the Ethereum sort of ecosystem will continue to be powered by Celestia, and I think it'll grow a lot. Like there's a lot of, like, if you think about it, there's so many different EVM roll-up stacks, like Arbitrum and Optimism and zkSync, and you name it, like Scroll, like there's so many, and each one of them has their own pipeline of all these chains that are going to get launched. So there's going to be like just a huge demand for block space now, and so that's like sort of that side of the sort of ecosystem. But we're also paying a lot of attention currently to the Bitcoin roll-up ecosystem. So like a year ago, around this time, we launched a Bitcoin roll-up on testnet using Rollkit, kind of as a meme. And then it was crazy how like the community reaction to that. And then like, since then, I think there's just been a lot more just like growing interest in like running Bitcoin L2s. I think it's really exciting because Bitcoin fundamentally, like what modularity does is it can help you extend the functionality of your base layer. And then Bitcoin has had always very limited functionality.
Yes.
They started with Taproot, they started to be able to do NFTs and BRC20s and stuff like that. But this will be, once they start doing L2s, they will have like a whole nother just, explosion, I think, of innovation on Bitcoin. So we really want to be part of that, because Bitcoin is has the most sort of like liquid and valuable base currency. It has an insanely large community worldwide.
Battle tested.
And
like
it's
no one
all
else.
exactly, and it's all pent up.
Yeah.
There's like so much pent up demand to do that. So I think that's one thing. I mentioned obviously roll chains and Rollkit as like sort of how we're also hoping to help the Cosmos ecosystem, because like currently in Cosmos, yes, Cosmos makes it really easy to launch a chain from the software perspective, but you still need to issue a token, and you still need to bootstrap a validator set and stuff like that. And so what Celestia's value prop is to Cosmos is like, hey, you can have a sovereign chain, and you can customize it and do all these things, but you don't have to issue a token or bootstrap a validator set. So hopefully it can make launching a Cosmos chain significantly easier. And roll chains is an interesting approach, because one of the problems is like, you know, Cosmos chains are very privileged with having IBC out of the box. And that's one of the things that a validator set gets you. When you do a roll up, currently the interoperability options are not as good as IBC. But if you do roll chains, you kind of have this middle ground where you can have a very lightweight validator set, because you're not getting your security necessarily fully from that validator set. So it can be small. You don't have to issue your own token. And that validator set, or it's more like a sequencer set, can then act as sort of the committee for an IBC-based interoperability thing. So there's that. The Solana thing is still very early, but there's been rumblings in the Solana community about L2s. They're running into congestion issues. The chain has been down. And so I feel like even the Solana people, even though their rhetoric and philosophy is all about like anti-rollup, you know, anti-app chain, I think kind of inevitably it's starting to move in that direction. And then lastly is the Celestia native ecosystem. You know, there's teams like Eclipse that are doing SVM rollup. There's teams like Movement that I'm really excited about doing MoveVM. So like we're seeing this sort of Initia and Fluent are doing like WASM based stuff. So we're seeing this expansion of different execution environments, because currently it's mostly EVM, some Cosmos SDK rollup frameworks, but like all these other VMs are not represented or supported yet. And so we're going to see expansion there. We have shared sequencers like Astria that I'm really excited about. And they have plans on like not just launching a shared sequencer, but a bunch of sort of first chains and applications. And there's not much that I can share, but there's a lot of like NFT related stuff that I think is going to come out. The sloths were an awesome you know, thing that you know, just started totally independent, by the way. I was very lucky to be online and get to mint one.
I was sleeping. I was sleeping during the mint. I missed out on it. But I think it was like minted out within like 2 hours or something, right? Like it was not up for long.
I don't know how long, but yeah, maybe like 2 or 4 hours, something like that.
A couple hours,
yeah.
But yeah, I was deep asleep. I think it was 2 or 3 a.m. here in Dubai around that time. So I unfortunately missed out on it. But yeah, I think it's very interesting. Obviously, the kind of creation and evolution of the Celestia ecosystem. You mentioned Movement. I actually also did an interview with Rushi here, Shishasito,
in this
episode
chair.
In this chair. Yeah.
Nice.
I think episode 2 or 3. I have to check, but I strongly recommend everyone to also watch that. A really amazing guy. I think Rushi is probably going to be one of the superstars this year, this cycle. But yeah, very exciting. Excited about that. One thing though, I think that some people are maybe like, if we just say, okay, like this sounds really amazing, everything, right? Perfect. But also I think if you look into other ecosystems as well, you're like, okay, there's like rollups here, there's L2s as a service there. It's like, don't you think that we're maybe at a point where there's an oversupply of block space? And like, is that something that kind of Celestia is positioned to capture most of that value? And then also with this in mind to say, okay, how does the chain itself, the ecosystem itself, remain kind of sustainable and profitable in the long term, right? So maybe you can kind of touch upon kind of the business model of Celestia, but also kind of how you view this generally, right? The crypto space exploding, obviously it's also packed to kind of the excitement around, you know, prices going up, and there's like chains launching left and right, and we're doing this, we're doing that. Like, how do you view that whole kind of block space, you know, demand versus supply?
Yeah,
dynamics?
that's a really good question. So the interesting thing, so not all block space is consumed because not all block space is desirable necessarily, desirable enough to be fully consumed. And so in that sense, in a narrow sense, well, like, yeah, there's an oversupply in the sense of that, like, there's a lot of unused block space. But when you look at certain ecosystems, there's an absolutely shortage, right? Ethereum, Bitcoin, Solana,
Yes.
right? Any chain that like succeeds in getting adoption runs into this problem. So in that sense, there's a need for a chain that can supply sort of like supplementary block space for those ecosystems when they run into their scaling bottlenecks, right? So I think that's one thing that Celestia is very committed and very well suited to solve, is to supplement block space with like ecosystems that have congestion. The other thing is, yes, like right now, there are not that many users in crypto. And when there are not that many users, there's not that much demand to transact compared to where we're going. But like if you believe that Web3 is going to be extremely useful and will have killer applications that, you know, people all around the world are going to be using on a daily basis, we're going to need a shitload more block space than we currently have. And the thing is, you're never going to know in advance what those things are going to be or when you're going to need it. So the best thing you can do is to be proactive and be prepared to meet that demand when it comes. And it could happen like literally in a month. It could be like, you know, the Facebook of Web3 comes online and like there's just like insane user growth, right? And we want to hopefully not hit scale fails through that user growth, and be ready to like welcome all those people and give them a good user experience and not have high fees and things like that. So I think that's another way to look at it, is like Celestia trying to be proactive and plan for a future where that's sort of where things are now. In terms of like the sustainability or like economics of block space, the way we see it is it's about like trying to provide block space at a low enough cost where as many applications as possible are feasible, and do it at scale. Do it like when you're, obviously if you're selling, let's say you only have, you know, 2 megabytes of block space every 10 seconds, and you're selling that block space for, you know, a few cents per megabyte or whatever, you're not, the protocol overall can never earn that much revenue to be sustainable, likely. But what we're trying to go to is maintain that price point, like a low price point, but scale the production massively. And then when you're selling more of a good, then the price is low, it still ends up being quite a lot of revenue essentially. So I think that's sort of the where we want to go, versus like I think Ethereum's, you know, and other like chains who have this sort of like are economically sustainable, like maybe Bitcoin, they're just because they're selling their block space at a really high premium. And I don't think that that's sustainable or actually desirable long term, because it's actually bad for users and for applications. It limits what kind of applications are, you know, actually viable, and it makes users pay a lot. Like when I've had to do some USDC transfers lately, and it's like I've been paying like $25 per transfer, which is not that bad, but still kind of like, dude, that's I feel like that is not how it should be long term. So and I think there's gonna be a lot of induced demand too. Like when you lower the cost of something, it opens up the possibility for people to build new things, and means that more users want to transact. Because like maybe some people who wanted to send that USDC, let's say I want to send, actually this is actually a real thing, I need to send 5 USDC to someone, it's really dumb, but I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to pay $25. Like, but the average person won't, like, that's why you don't, like, payments.
It's inefficient. And you're also kind of priced out, right? Like, and if this gets worse and worse. I remember that's actually how I kind of got into Cosmos in the first place in 2020 DeFi summer, because I got priced out from Ethereum at one point, right? I was like, this is not getting better, it actually gets worse, right? And they were like, the cost per transaction or trade or whatever on Uniswap were like 3 figures. Like, you could literally get priced out. And I think from that aspect alone, I think, yeah, we need to kind of evolve and fix those fundamental problems, right? I also think like crypto or Web3, this whole kind of industry, we're not even at a point yet where the infrastructure is like battle tested and like efficient, right? I think we're still working on the fundamentals.
Totally.
Right, because I think a lot of people always say, oh, there's not enough users, which is true, obviously. There's no killer applications, right? Like sometimes things pop up and explode and are relevant for 6 months, but then there's poor economics, poor kind of efficiency of the infrastructure, and it kind of dies out because the infra is not ready yet, right?
Yeah.
So, but it sounds like with Celestia, you kind of see this as a very long-term play.
Yes.
To be positioned for a future where you have full sovereignty, full customizability, but also super fast, cheap to use, and you kind of want to stick to those principles, right?
Exactly. Yeah. The other interesting thing is like, imagine if Ethereum or Bitcoin or even Solana like didn't have scaling bottlenecks where like the fees would increase or maybe the chain would go down or whatever. Then like you see these network effects naturally accrue to these ecosystem, these chains. And I think there's a lot of natural network effects in blockchains themselves. They are networks. But when you run into these scaling issues and the fees go up or the chain goes down, you have these negative network effects that counterbalance and counteract that natural sort of like positive network effect. And I think Celestia hopes to have robust enough scaling that you can not run into those problems. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of work to be done to ensure that we can actually continue to scale.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as like, it's not a one and done thing. Like it's still a hard problem scaling.
It's a very dynamic process, I guess, also at the same time. But so what is kind of we're in April now, April 2024. What's kind of the year-end goals, roadmaps, objectives, maybe some key milestones that you want to achieve? What's kind of the core Celestia core like roadmap like for the end of the year? And then I don't know if you beyond that you already have kind of like milestones and ideas for kind of achievements that you want to have.
Yeah, good question. We have a very active CIP process. So it's this governance process that's completely open, and there's a lot of different contributors from the Cosmos ecosystem as well as the Ethereum ecosystem and just broader modular ecosystem. And so that's driving a lot of the sort of roadmap currently. And so the first thing is there's going to be sort of like a first network upgrade with some small changes like adding interchain accounts and packet forward middleware, things that like will improve certain sort of like uses of Celestia or connections to other chains, as well as some other just like small fixes. But longer term, there's a lot more interesting things. First is scaling the block space, obviously. So currently we're at 2 megabytes. We can go up to 8 megabytes, but we want to go a lot further. So there's like a active sort of work being done in investigating like what are the scaling bottlenecks to getting to, let's say, 100 megabyte blocks or even beyond that. And so I think that because that's like the next thing, because like there's very much I could foresee a future where if we enter another bull cycle or whatever, or there's like once all these new chains are launched, and if they're using Celestia for DA, all that block space could get filled up. So we want to be ahead of the curve, like I said. And I feel like 100 megabyte blocks, we can get there. That's so much throughput. I feel pretty confident that like we would be able to like absorb all the demand, unless there's some really crazy breakout app. So that's a big one. Another really important one. So we have some other things like I forgot to mention another one. We're adding pruning, which is going to make light nodes lighter and the overall protocol less expensive for validators and for nodes to run. Because currently, as there's more and more data that it gets published, nodes have to carry that. And I know you guys at Stakesito run nodes, and so you understand like when you keep on having to increase your sort of like disk requirements, like it can add up over time. So adding pruning will reduce that. Also means that light nodes again will be light properly, and you can run them on your phone without having a lot of storage. And then probably one of the more interesting things on our roadmap is this idea of ZK accounts. So Celestia can do IBC because it's a Cosmos chain, but it doesn't have a way to verify, sort of bridge directly to rollups, because rollups don't always necessarily have a committee to do IBC. We don't want to have a bunch of IBC clients running on Celestia, because that can make it chain heavier. So the solution is to, and we also don't want to add full state and execution on Celestia, because one of the value props of Celestia is that it's light and minimal.
Yeah.
And so ZK accounts is this interesting idea where we can add ZK verification functionality to Celestia that's state minimized and execution minimized, but enables the TIA token to be bridged in a trust minimized way to rollups. So that's a really interesting one.
Nice. Cool, man. Yeah, I think a lot of very exciting things. And obviously, you know, the kind of retail audience, including myself, you know, we're always also very excited to see new kind of rollups launching, new chains launching, because obviously there's also this kind of airdrop meta narrative going on, right? Which also I think is going on for the sloth, right? The Celestia sloth. You mentioned earlier that you kind of got to mint one. And I think the backstory is actually that Zaki and Inclusion were kind of like the core force behind it, and also the designer from After the Filter, which is also a great collection on Stargaze. And honestly, I feel like sloth and even bad kids, right? This is kind of helping to realign the customers a little bit, right? Because, and I keep talking about this here on the channel a lot, right? It's like Cosmos' strength is basically that it is fully kind of sovereign, customizable, and individual in a sense. The app chain thesis, all these kind of things. But at the same time, it's also fragmented, right? Different teams swimming into different directions. But I feel like NFTs, like the sloth, you know, they restore some of that alignment and culture. And just like, how do you feel about that? And yeah, what is your kind of thoughts about the sloth? I guess you're a sloth maxi, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say maxi, but I see NFTs as such an important driver of community and culture.
Yeah.
And you know, when I saw the sloths come out, I had heard rumors about it, and I like the idea of sloths. And maybe I can give some like lore about, I think, where the idea of sloths came from, that Zaki kind of like spearheaded, is that, you know, Celestia's original name was Lazy Ledger. And so before it became Celestia, and you know, the sloths are sort of like the laziest animals in the world. So it's all about, you know, kind of like hearkening back to that original vision. And I think there's also a lot of through lines with the value proposition of Celestia, which is that, you know, if you're too lazy, or not too lazy, but like Celestia does a lot of work for you, so you can be lazy, right? As a developer, if you want to launch your own chain, again, you know, rather than having to bootstrap your own validators and, you know, issue a token and all this hard work, you can be lazy and just Celestia did it for you. So I think that's part of it. But in general, about the sloths, like yeah, I was just really excited to see an NFT collection that was very aligned with the Celestia community and modular community, because it's the first one that we've had, right? And you know, the fact that it was mintable with TIA, and with, you know, to be eligible, you had to be a TIA staker, and all those things like made it so that like the core group of people who got them initially were very Celestia aligned. And I don't know, I also think they're just kind of cute, and
they're very nice.
Yeah.
I need to get one for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of Easter eggs throughout the collection too. That I'm sure I haven't seen all of them, but like the fact that Zaki, I think, I'm pretty sure he probably planned this, but there's like the monocles on them. For example, one that I minted has a monocle. Also, by the way, I was very lucky to mint mine. I've saw people online saying like, "Oh, it's definitely an inside job." Like, most of the people in the Celestia Labs team did not mint one. I think only one other person I know happened to mint one, because they happened to. I was just at the right place at the right time. I saw a tweet by, I can't even remember who, and I was like, oh shit, and I just like immediately went to Stargaze like and was like minting, and I'm just really stoked. But there's things like the monocle is interesting, because it kind of, that to me is a connection back to Mustafa, who's the sort of like the author of the Lazy Ledger white paper, the co-founder of Celestia. He back in his previous life was a hacktivist in Anonymous and this other hacker group called LulzSec. And the LulzSec sort of like logo is this like guy with a top hat with a glass of wine with a monocle on. And so I feel like there's the monocle is a hearkening to that. There's also a one of the sloths I've seen, it has a CIA hat, which is hilarious. Because,
we know the story.
yeah. So anyway, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff in there, and it's just a cool, fun, playful collection. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked about it.
Nice. Cool, man. Yeah, I think we're gonna wrap it up. Is there any kind of final alpha, final kind of thing that maybe, I don't know, people underrate about Celestia, things that are coming up? You teased the kind of Solana stuff coming soon, Bitcoin stuff. Sounds like you're very excited about that too. I don't know if there's any alpha you can drop or anything like that.
Alpha. I feel like I've kind of shared most that I can think of. I think the main alpha is just that you know, there's a lot of modular native and so Celestia native stuff coming soon this year. And that's what I'm really excited about, because similar to the sloth, like the sloths, what I loved about them was they're very modular native and Celestia native. And like for now, Celestia's main use has really just been to scale Ethereum, right? Which is great and a very viable, valuable use case, but it's not like ultimately where Celestia wants to go in the long term is to have like sovereign rollups and like a native modular ecosystem. And I think that like we're going to see a lot more of that going into the end of the year. And so that's what I'm most excited about.
Nice. And there will also be a couple airdrops, obviously for TS stakers, but also for the sloth holders.
So you sound like you have some alpha.
I always share alpha. You know, I'm actually also at a point now where I'm like losing the overview of like all the airdrops that are happening, right?
Yeah.
I think obviously for kind of staking tier, there's a lot of airdrops you know users might be eligible for. Also, I think what you said earlier about kind of ICA coming to Celestia, that would probably also boost more kind of the liquid staking adoption and liquid staking providers. I think that might also a little bit like kind of evolve or change, I don't know, change the landscape, but like evolve definitely, which also might change a little bit kind of like how to play airdrops in Celestia. And the sloth, of course. I think that's also a lot of alpha.
So just on that point of the interchain account stuff and the liquid staking, an interesting thing about the ZK accounts is that it also can enable forms of restaking for TIA, which is going to be it was well first of all, by the way, that's just in theory, and you know, the ZK accounts themselves are a long way from being shipped. So
modularity means restaking.
It can be alpha, but it's also like, you know, quite far away, I think. Although I think there's this new project called Karak that is trying to be like omni-chain restaking, or like it can have more than, it's not just about ETH. So maybe that they'll like, you don't need the ZK accounts to support TIA restaking. You can do it in other ways. So that'll be interesting to see if anyone builds that kind of thing.
Bullish. Any final words to the Cosmos community, to the cosmonauts out there?
You know, Cosmos and Celestia is Cosmos and is Cosmos aligned. We take a lot of inspiration from Cosmos, and our hope is to like turbocharge the app chain and sovereign chain vision, right? And like actually, I mean, my talk in Cosmos 2022 was titled "The Internet of Modular Blockchains," and that's really like a vision that I still very much believe in, which is like the Internet of Chains, but with all the benefits of modularity under the hood. So yeah, we're the Internet of Blockchains. We're getting closer every year, and Celestia is doing our part to like contribute to that.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for the interview. It was really nice.
Yeah.
Cheers, man.